I just wanted to record a little voiceover around my resource, which is called ADHD PD. Let's change the narrative of ADHD. And it's based around me sharing this in person, so I wanted to include getting them thinking and talking and questions throughout and activities. So when I presented this initially, I took lots of fidget toys and lots of resources for people to look at and talk about. And yeah, so the first question is, what do you think when you hear ADHD? Just to get a feel for what people already know, what they don't know, and where it might take me when I'm sharing this with them. Also, if people are reading this by themselves as well, it just gets them thinking about what they think about ADHD, and then seeing if that changes. From feedback with other RTLB, we decided that a student profile might be good for teachers to think about, and teacher aides, even for parents to think about their own child, like what are their strengths, what are their struggles, and what are some strategies. And when I presented this, it gave the teacher aides something to think about as we went through, and an activity to complete and something to focus on. I then go on to talk about the science and the research kind of behind ADHD. What is it? Is it real? Some of the research, and I found when I was presenting this that people didn't actually know this, didn't know anything about the research that's a neurodevelopmental disorder, that it's hereditary, or there's research showing hereditary factors. And then the 3 predominant presentations of ADHD, I wanted to include that because as part of my research, it discussed, my visualization talked about and found one of the key themes was the hidden kids with ADHD, so the ones that aren't necessarily hyperactive or aren't presenting in a hyperactive way, and not just the girls but other boys as well that maybe don't present in a stereotypical way. So I had the 3 presentations of ADHD, and then what could these look like? So when they're struggling to plan or organise, this could look like either disorganisation or spontaneity, and this created quite a lot of discussion as well, that regulation and emotions, that either they may overreact to things or underreact. Understanding social cues, they might have low empathy around things or very high, overly empathetic. I wanted to really focus on strengths because obviously this presentation is around changing oh my gosh, my brain's not working. Changing the narrative around ADHD. So talking about the strengths of ADHD is a really good way to do that, because often we always focus on the negatives and the struggles. And so it really made the teacher aides think about what are the strengths of their students and what can they focus on. I just found some positive affirmation-y posters as well. I wanted to include information around girls as something separate as well, because it's quite different and quite new information, and a lot of people don't know much of it. This is quite scientific, all this information, but I tried to present it in a way that was a little more simplistic when I talk about it in person. I also included some statistics around referrals in Tauranga, which is showing that girls aren't really being referred in comparison to boys until they're around 15, and then it jumps. And then more information, so what could it look like in girls and all the differences that ADHD could look like. I wanted to give some information around how we treat ADHD, because this resource is eventually going to be adapted for parents, for the community as a whole. It's just interesting for people to see that actually, yes, medication is one way we can treat people with ADHD, but it doesn't work for everyone. And there's so many other ways that you can support children that have ADHD. I specifically was asked to include information around medication by the Senko of the school that I was presenting this to, because a lot of the teacher aides in that school work with children that are medicated, and so she wanted them to have a bit more information around how medication works. So I included that, and they actually found that really interesting, and I compared it to other medications like antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, because they may have heard of them more. And then I wanted to talk about the impacts of the medication at school, because they think about that, yes, it's going to make them focus, but they don't think about when it wears off, what could be going on for that child and the extra struggles. I then wanted to add in something that helps people to know what it's actually like to have ADHD, and this was actually the feedback I got from the teacher aides I presented it to. They said that it was one of the most powerful parts of the information, because it actually made them feel frustrated, and it's a really, really good video, and I recommend watching it anyway. And then I also included this really beautiful poem that somebody with ADHD has written, and that video as well was created by high school students in the UK that have ADHD. So yeah, it's a really nice bringing the voice of people with ADHD into this, even though I couldn't bring the community of Tauranga with ADHD into it. So people really resonated with these, and we had a talk about the poem as well. And a lot of people have seen there's like an iceberg of ADHD with the struggles, but I found this is the struggle one. But I also found one that's got the strengths. I don't know if I've included, there it is there, the ADHD strengths iceberg. So it's kind of a nice comparison between the strengths and the struggles with the two icebergs there. And then I move on to talk about strategies. Now, these strategies are quite simple as well, because I wanted it to reach as many people as possible. So talking about overall supports, how relationships are really key. I use this model, which is Dr. Dan Steigel's model around the meltdowns that children can have with ADHD and how you can explain it to them in a really simple way. This is a really lovely strategy that just helps teachers and teacher aides and parents to remember on the go how to support children that maybe are in fight and flight or have had a meltdown. And it's just showing them that you see them, helping them feel that they belong, telling them what's happening next, and giving them some control back in the situation. Talking about prevention, how can we prevent emotional overwhelm? We talked about sensory struggles, how to go at the fidget toys, supporting engaging with peers. A lot of these as well, everyone mentioned, are very similar with children with autism, and that's a really good thing about all these strategies, is that it's going to work for not just the kids with ADHD, but all children, hopefully. I talked about zones of regulation. This particular school is doing a whole school project on it next year, zones of regulation. But you can, through this, I've been project and just in my cases as well, discussing with teachers how you can bring emotional regulation and emotional language and those kind of supports into the classroom without having to run a whole program. And there's been some really creative and thoughtful ways that teachers have done that when they've been really busy. So lack of personal space, unstructured times, if they've got attention-seeking behaviours and hyperfocus, also for procrastination or struggle to initiating tasks, so body doubling, visual timers. And then time for questions. From the feedback from my initial presentation, they asked for steps around diagnosis. And so I've talked about diagnosis for children, what the steps are there, the different pathways you can go down, and then for adults as well, and also some psychiatrist options in Tauranga as well. And then these are just other resources and websites that I'd like to build up over time. These are some of the main ones that I found useful so far, but I'm sure there's many, many more out there, and I want to build on this over time as well. Yeah, so that's just a little overview of my resource. I also created some handouts as well, which have got just some positive posters, and I found a really lovely website that has it's all these really lovely positive hooray for ADHD posters and sayings and information, kind of like what I was trying to do when I wanted to get the community to show what ADHD is to them, but it's all made and it's all on a website. And so this was one of the handouts that I gave, and they're all created by people with ADHD. And one of my initial interviewees said that she'd love positive posters to put around school to share about ADHD that children might resonate with. And so I thought this was a really cool website that I found as well, that I've included. So yeah, there we go.